me just, okay, cool. So what I wanted to do, and this at some point is going to feel a little redundant going forward because, I'm going to cover it some more in, coming months because it's such a critical piece. And, you know, of course, I spoke on it in comment recently the other day. We're going to get back into, again, the idea of covering, and most importantly, and of course, like anything, when you're restoring something, it's because it was there before. It needs to be put back into place. All right. So, we're not talking about bringing forth a new thing, but, correcting something that was previously disrupted. All right. And I'm going to explain why it was disrupted and what happened and, what we need to do. Now I'm not going to be as long. Like I said, I'm breaking this up into parts, probably around, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe January, late January, February. I'm going to do a whole series on this, in particular, marriage forms, relationships, and, nation building. Really just marital relationships and nation building. I don't really care about boyfriend, girlfriend relationships outside of that. So as of right now, all of you have been subjected to the structure of the covering initiative by now. And I'm sure with, varied results, but, I do know, and I have witnessed that everyone has, had different things pulled out of them as a result, you know, just in coming out of their own comfort zones that many people have been locked into. And for the most part, those comfort zones are a product of the dominant society or the more stronger society, that we find ourselves. Could you mute out, Baba Mari, please? That more forceful society that many of us find ourselves in have created a thought paradigm. And it's really a satanic kind of thought, you know, and I want you to understand Satanism by that which adheres itself to the material. That's that which adheres itself to the third dimension. That's Satanism. All right. So, you'll notice that spirit is embedded a lot of times when we start talking about relationships, when we start talking about nation building. One of the first things when you start talking about nation building, the first thing people will say is, well, you know, you got to have money to build a nation. You can't do anything without resources and finances. That's not true. But that comes from that spirit of Satan, or spirit of materialism. In the same instance, you'll find a lot of people when you start talking about plural marriage. You talk about monogamous marriage, everything's all good. All right, whatever. If you say, well, I'm going to take on 2 women, 3 women, or a woman says, I want to invite another woman into the family, the first thing that comes up is, can you take care of 2 women? Can you take care of 3 women? But nobody ever asks that if you're just marrying 1 woman. Nobody says, can you take care of 1 woman? Because when you're dealing with plurality, you're dealing with the restoring patriarchy. You're dealing with the return back from what Satan disrupted. So as soon as you go to do anything that disrupts that, there are certain spirits that are immediately going to launch forth. So that spirit or the worship of money, if you will, is one of the ones that's deeply embedded in any time to return back to our actual roots. So you say plurality, they'll say, can you take care of them? You say nation building, you can't afford nation building. You're going to notice that it's going to come every time you want to pursue something in terms of education that restores you as a person. I want to learn about my history, but I don't pay the bills. You see, it's always going to take you back to something dealing with finances. That's when you hear that, that's your clue to kind of already know who's speaking. You already get a sense of, okay, I get what spirit this is coming from. Like I said, I'm going to share more of this on YouTube, but I'm at a place in my own development where I'm not answering base questions about nation building and plurality at this point. You know, I've kind of graduated beyond that, you know, so I don't even answer, well, why can't I have 2 or 3 husbands? I'm not answering dumb questions like that, or, Well, can you take care through? That's an idiot's errand. And I'm not going to be sent on a fool's run. What I'm speaking of here, just so you know, this isn't, it's groundwork on some levels, but on other levels, you may already have a aversion to some of the things that I'm speaking on. And I'm not here to get you to try to agree. If you don't agree, too bad for you. Let's get back to it. So, of course, the covering initiative. And of course, that within itself caused some disruptions. People started to loosen their grip from Anu, once they saw in practice that not only do I have to now answer to someone, but I have to also be responsible to someone. Now it's not so fun anymore, right? And of course, because there's a spirit that comes forth that says you don't want to do that. You got too much going on in your life. You gotta get your money. You gotta do this. You gotta do that. This person's going to disrupt your lifestyle, right? So, let's take it from the beginning. And like I said recently, when I made a comment on a segment, if you typically talk to your average Christian, anything that they say is going to start at the New Testament, right? And the reason being is because it's very easy to support a Western mindset pulling from the New Testament. So they won't start at the Old Testament. The New Testament also, it's just kind of backwards in thinking. Like I said, why would you read a book from the middle? Usually we start a book from the first page, but you talk to your average Christian. So I want to be clear. And that's why, like, even in the Anu way, when I'm speaking about certain things and I'm using certain words, I'm not speaking from a Christian perspective. I have nothing to do with Christians. It's world apart. You may hear me speak about something from a scriptural perspective or from Torah or even from the Bible, and I'm still not speaking from a Christian perspective. I'll never speak from a Christian perspective unless I'm just making a point about Christians. Okay. So I want you to be clear as we go on this journey. Again, as I've said before, this Torah is a book by black people for black people. Period. That's it. And you may be triggered in other ways, but that's just only because of your own laziness. And I'm not here to speak to your laziness. You may hear certain terms and be like, oh, this takes me back to church. Well, your ass was sitting up in church too lazy to figure out where the book came from and what it was about. So I'm not responsible for your lazy cultural triggers. Learn something. All right. So with that being said, going back to the book of Genesis. So in the very beginning, we had the Elohim, gods and goddesses, if you will, or, well, we won't say the Anu yet. We're going to leave that teaching for later. But we had these archetypes, these deities that said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness, right? That's the first thing. So when they said, let us make man, they created man as male and female. All right. This is the whole crux of everything. If you don't get this part, you don't get anything else. That's why they put it in the very beginning in Bereshit. They put it right there. So that way, that right there is your whole basis for nation building. The Elohim said, let us create man in our image, male and female. He created them. That's it. If you could take that line or that passage and study that for 2 years, study it for 5 years. It's that powerful. Okay. And I'm going to get into why. So why do we call it, or why am I calling it, restorative patriarchy? Because we're restoring the natural divine order that was before the beast entered the garden and disrupted it. Okay. Now, what was the order? And just like I did with the, how did the Negro get here? I made myself a couple of notes so I wouldn't say too much. Because like I said, I'm going to break it up into kind of a series. So the first thing to understand is that we're speaking from Torah, right? Torah, first 5 books, right? And, you got to understand that the Torah was not written for all of you. It was written for Hebrew men. It was not written for Hebrew women. It was not written for Hebrew children. It was written for Hebrew men. Okay. because the man was always supposed to be the educator of the household. So some people, when they learn that, they think similar to Tantra. They think that, oh, it's because the woman already had that wisdom inside of her because she was Sophia, the great. That's not, all of that is off. It has nothing to do with it. It's because that women, you are to submit to your own husbands. That's scripture. Your own husbands. It's very important. Not to every man, your own. And I'll explain that. So, like I said, when we don't get what's in the very beginning, what we'll do, or what society usually tells us to do, is to jump to the New Testament. And then we can impose Western ideology from there. It's so much easier from there. Male and female, he created them in his image. So he started off man as a union. He didn't start man off as a single. So, but he started off with man, with Adam. Okay. So it started with a patriarch. A patriarch created or produced another patriarch and put everything that patriarch needed inside of it. Then later extracted. What does matriarchy do? So let's take the feminist perspective for a second. Because we know that the creator's original will was patriarchy, just through that one passage, just through how creation, the creation of people came about. Matriarchy, what it does is it disrupts the will. Patriarchy is put in place to ensure that there is a direct line of purpose and will that's materialized. So like when the creator said, let there be light, and there was light. You see, there's a thought, there's a will, and then it comes to materialization, straight and direct, no disruptions. So when the creator said, let us make man in our image, there's a will, there's a thought, and then it comes to materialization uninterrupted, right? But you notice that there's a single thought. There's one thought. The patriarch said, let us. So it's like me saying to my woman, let us do this. We're going to do it, but it's my idea. It's my thought. Okay. So now what happens when you have a matriarchal establishment and you have, or even a polyandrous establishment, and you have one woman and you have many thoughts happening? There's no one will and one unifying purpose of thought. This is why you have so many females who will tell you immediately, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want in life. I don't know. I got so many different things because there's been too many thoughts injected. You see, so there's no there's no will. There's no direct, pathway of what's going to materialize. Now, here's another important thing that I want you to keep in mind. And this goes to the plurality discussion. I can have one will in many women. Let's say if I have 10 women, right? What those 10 women represent are the potential expressions of my will. Now, let's say if I have one woman and 10 men. Now I have 10 wills, 10 purpose, 10 ideas implanted into one vessel. Now, here's where it gets real simple. I'll use my family as an example. Because I've always been very fond of martial sciences, as well as music, but martial science is a little bit easier. All of my children grew up training. The boys and the girls, all of them trained. From the moment, they could identify their left foot from their right foot is when training began. So that was always my test. You know, left from right. All right. Now it's time to learn how to punch. Okay. So it has happened. When my children were in environments and they struck out at other children violently, it was very clear that I was to blame because these are my children. I own them. And if you know what I do, then you know what my children do. We're a violent tribe, right? Now, let's say there were 5 different men and there's one woman and the children are out somewhere and they display certain behaviors. Who do we blame? They have no idea. So what patriarchy establishes is it establishes ownership. And you want that direct line of ownership for accountability. So that way we can clearly see the cause and we can clearly see the effect. This is why it's important to have one patriarch. When a woman is uncovered, I want you to look at it like it's a field that's uncovered. A field that's uncovered, what happens? Or we could just take national parks for an example. It's a great example of uncovered fields. You go to a national park, you see all kind of stuff being grown. You know, when you go deep up in there, there's people who make a lot of money off of what they plant inside of national parks, where things are left areas are left unattended to. There are people who live inside a national park. You go deep enough, right? Because nobody's covering it. Nobody's watching it. You see? So what happens in that instance, if you associate the woman with the field, then you recognize that it's uncovered and any seed can be planted. And that's very important in today's society. Any seed can be planted in an uncovered woman. You see, patriarchy, what it does is it trains you towards ownership. Your children are trained towards ownership and your women are trained to be owned. Why? Because her first experience of patriarchy is a non-elective experience of ownership. Her father, and we're saying humanly non-elective. As a spirit, she chooses a father. This is who my daddy gonna be. And the daddy owns her. That's an important point. And I know there's other aspects that we're going to get into that in a second. But that's an important point. So when there's patriarchy and the woman or the field is covered, there's a sealing of will. There's a sealing of everything is sealed off. Okay. So my will is here. My manifestation is here, period. Nothing gets in between that. See, when you had the experience in the garden with Adam and the beast that we know as the serpent, what happened was he allowed another voice to come into the mind of his woman, right? So the seal was broken. The covenant was broken right in that moment. That was an adulterous experience. I'll explain that in a minute. Because patriarchy is the only way. If I make a covenant to the creator and I say, this is what I'm going to do, and then I have my women and I have my children, and I'm imputing that same relationship that I have with the creator, I'm imputing it into them, then now we still have a sealed connection. Because I'm offloading the ashe or the authority, author, father. I'm offloading my authority and sending my relationship straight into them. And of course, this allows us to trace the cause and effect. They behave this way. Why? Because I am the original cause. How am I the cause? Because I'm the one who planted the seed / idea into the woman. I created the cause and the children that she produced are the effect. So whatever happens, I'm to blame. And it's reflective of my relationship with the creator. It's important to understand that on the small plan, and by now you all should know that the small plan is the planette. The small plan is where the creator seeks to see physical representation of its will. That's where it expresses the physical reality of its will on the small plan. Now, the physical manifestation of its will are you and I. Let us make man. As soon as that's said, okay, I have a will. I have something I want to do. It manifests into what? Man. So that's the energy of the Shemayim. We'll get into Shemayim a little bit later. Within that, there's disruptors to manifesting the will of the creator on the small plan. Crooked politicians, 10%ers, secret societies, the parasitic global elite, aggressive feminists, and anybody who pretty much deals with the children of Yisrael shrewdly. If you remember when I spoke about that idea of let's deal with them shrewdly because they're multiplying in reference to the children of Israel, you know, when the controllers of Misraim or Egypt had said that. So those are the individuals who seek to disrupt the straight line, just like the serpent did in the garden. Oh, okay. He told you this. He told you that. Well, check this out. You could do this. You could do that. That breaks the seal of patriarchy, because there was obedience to what? A father. And then something came in and said, no, do it this way. So now we lost our connection with the father. Now, some of the ways that this is done, men heading up a household is the beginning of nation building. You cannot nation build as a single man. I don't care if you got a 20 bedroom, 20,000 square foot home on 10 acres of land. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You could live in a cardboard box, but if you're heading up a household, you have the beginnings of a nation. Why? Because the heading of a homestead is the reflection of what the creator originally did when man was created. And you're building your nation upon those divine principles. So the first thing a disruptor has to do is keep the man from ever being able to head its own household. As many of you men know, that's one of the most dangerous things you could try to do today. Because sometimes heading your own household means that you got to be, in this society, you got to be tough and you got to be harsh. You might have to put your hands on somebody. Well, you go to jail. Adult or child, doesn't matter. You can't, you're going to jail. Or you'll get labeled like a Joe Jackson, who, while he had his children were not crazy, were not cutting up their faces and bleaching and all of that stuff like that. So what did they have to do? He headed a household. To have that many children, he had no outside children, no reports of extramarital affairs. All of those pretty daughters, not one of them were pregnant or anything like that, or no one struck out on drugs. His wife didn't even work. He held it down completely while in the ghetto of Gary, Indiana. And we find a way to demonize him because he was and they were spiritual people. They were devout Jehovah Witnesses. Let's add that in there on top of everything. You see? So we got to disrupt that. We got to get in the middle of that, because all of the talent in this family, we have these people have the potential to be the most famous people on the planet. And they're going to show this. They're going to show that greatness comes from a patriarchal household, where all the children are kept in line, and we can't have that. No, we got to figure out a way to completely decimate this legacy. Right. And I mean, that's one example. There are other ones, but, you have to keep the men from heading up households, because when you can have a woman head up a household, when you have a matriarchal environment, then what you're able to establish is no organization, complete, organizational chaos. Why? Because there's no direct single will. There's no direct single mind. That's the key. You see, when you have uncovered females, they are typically enticed to head up the household through subsidies, welfare, food stamps, music, movies, doing it on your own. Or back in the days was a song, Sisters Doing It for Themselves. I remember, but, and I mean, there's newer songs, not like it stopped with that, but there's all kind of music and different entertainment that says, do it for yourself, do it without him. You can head it up by yourself. You don't need him. Right? So that becomes such the drive, and there's a reason for it, to keep these Hebrews from ever coming together, which I explained a little bit in the last time I spoke, but I'll get into a little bit more now. Now, I want to be clear though. A lot of times when it's spoken about, like, sisters are just abandoning the family structure. Yes, that's true. But one of the things that people leave out is that this has been done through violence and traumatization. So it's not like, sisters all just had a meeting one day and was like, yeah, let's just run the family ourselves. There was something that came in that not only disrupted, that took advantage of the woman's already maybe maligned way of thinking. Because we're all born with something malign. Men have a malignment, women have a malignment. If I'm a wicked person, I'll take advantage of it. That's all I'll do. I'll just instead of trying to support the person, I'll take advantage of it. Through violence, I mean, we have buck breaking. We have the Ma'afa, the rape that happened in the Ma'afa. We have all the images even today we see of police brutality and all these different things. These are all meant to keep men from heading the household. Because the first thing a woman is going to do is she's going to beat the man out of her children, right? Great example. I was talking to my brother yesterday. We had, went by, there's some women that we know in the area that they are all, they're living a lifestyle. They have vulvas. So I'm just going to say they're people who own vulvas, but don't deal with men. All right. Cause you got to keep changing the language around all the time, but they got vulvas, but they don't want anything to do with the penis, at least not a real one. And, we drove by and they were like redoing their whole like driveway, like digging it up, bringing new soil in, and, like they were hooking it up. And he was like, man, I don't even know how to do that. He was saying, man, that's good, man. They could do this and do that. Now, I've always noticed over there, I guess one of them has a son. And I said, but look at the boy. Look at how wayfish he is. Like he's super skinny. And he was actually sitting down on a pile of gravel while the females were shoveling and doing some other things. And I said, look at this. I said, I bet you they're perfectly fine with him being like that, with his little tight jeans on and just sitting there looking tired. And these are adult females. These are not like, I'm saying at minimal 35, maybe the late 40s. So you would think they would be saying, no, you're younger. You got more energy. You come over here and do this. Right. But, the idea there again is that we have to make sure that he can never grow into anything that may actually head up a household. So because the important thing to understand is that Yisrael can never conjoin under those conditions. Yisrael can never conjoin under matriarchy. It won't work because that's not restorative of Yahuwah's original vision or original idea. Right. So, and there's so many other, there's so many other pieces to that. But like I said, a lot of it has been done out of violence, so a female may say, well, it's better that I have a wayfish, weak, half sick, skinny son, because at least I know he's no threat to anyone. No one will shoot him down in the street or this or that, or maybe he spends all day in the house, but at least I know where he's at. He's not out there in those streets getting into fights and things like that. All the things that men are supposed to go do. So a lot of it again has been done through traumatization and also the exploitation of that Oya spirit that's in a lot of females where I want to be this. I want your charm. I want to have the charm where I can breathe fire too. I want to take Osayin's calabash and I want all the magic that's inside of it. I want the position of the man. I want to be, Hapset Shut. I want to be the bearded woman who wears pants. You see? So even when you look at some of those Orisha archetypes, a lot of times you don't realize that they represent the dysfunction that we all have, that we have to get through. Instead, we look at them and we want to come under them. So we worship that dysfunction. We praise it. That's not, like I said so many times, those archetypes are put forth for character building, not for you to try to be them. That's not a healthy way for a woman to be. There's nothing spiritual or divine about that. That's the mistake of that archetype. Every person who comes with a preponderance of certain kind of energy it helps you to understand, well, this is where my shortfalls may be. If I'm a Shango energy and I have this thing, I like women all the time and stuff, I also am going to go through some serious mood swings. I might suffer from depression. I may always constantly be over emoting and always be worrying about things all the time because I feel like I'm responsible for everybody because I feel like I'm the king. Everything comes with something, right? So the idea of one man controlling and commanding and being a captain to 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, 100 people. That whole idea, that's the original form of the creator's patriarchy. Because if we look at the creator, we're looking at an entity that is over how many people? Billions. So again, we're looking at that idea again of one patriarch ruling over many people, right? So even like with Anu, you notice the first thing I'm always saying, this is a patriarchal organization. This is patriarchal. I have to make that very clear because yes, we have had females who have come in and tried to impose suffering. Why? Because they're disruptors sent straight from Satan. We are restoring the kingdom of the Creator. Now you can restore that kingdom right in your own home. Why? Because every man has the right to be a king in his own homestead. Every single man. So every man should be the chief priest of his homestead. And remember, the word king means what? Kin. So if he has a kingdom, he is ruling the dominion of his kin. That's a kingdom. And every man has the right to be that. To be the chief educator, the chief priest, the chief king. That's how it's supposed to be. So what happens is when you get, again, you might be a man, let's just say, and I'm going to speak my language. Some of you may not be ready for this, but whatever. He's got 5 wives. He's got 6 wives. He's got 8 wives, right? So now he's ruling over 8 people automatically. Then we have children that come from those wives. Before you know it, he's ruling over 16, 20 people. Is that not a kingdom? Now you get 4 or 5 righteous men doing the same exact thing. You got over 100 people. And in all of those 4 or 5 men, they pick one patriarch, one king to say, you are going to be our captain. Now we truly have a representation of the kingdom of Yah. So every man has the right, and I'm saying the word right because it's a natural inkling to do it. I could say responsibility, but a real man would want to move into that anyway. You don't have to say, you need to go be a king. They want to be that anyway. Real men. You may have experienced something else because you weren't around real men. But we're speaking about the value of plurality, or what some people call polygyny. And like I said, at this point, we're kind of beyond the base discussions about it because those base discussions have nothing to do with nation building. They're just distractors. Can you take care of 3 women? Can you, just silly distractors. If you are living as a man, an indigenous tribal man, there's certain questions you don't even have to ask because there's certain things that come along with it. You see? So when we try to present it as an abstraction from what the rule is supposed to be, then it gets really easy to ask very stupid questions because we're looking at it from a Western perspective. Oh, you just want to have sex with all those women. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I want to have sex with all of them. I want to have sex with all the women on the planet. Really? I'm a man. That's how that goes. Am I supposed to be ashamed of that? No, I'm a man. You see, that's what's supposed to happen. We are all impregnated with the spirit of the Creator. I'm going to get into this in another thing, but the Creator has had sex with all of us. Because you think about something. When a woman has a child, I heard Mama Sequoia said this. She said, every child I had, I cried. Right? Now, I have seen my children born. It wasn't all my women are like kind of brolic, so it wasn't no tears. But I'm not saying you ain't tough here, but my women, they're all like Vikings. You know what I mean? So it wasn't no tears, but the thing about it is that there's a moment of death that happens that you can almost feel in the room when a child is born. Once that head comes out, there's something different that happens with that woman. And it is like a death. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of times we don't understand that same model, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. So what is man going to do in the moment that baby comes into that woman? That's that man exploding that woman, stretching that vagina beyond imagination. You see, but that's the same thing that the Creator does with you. When you accept the Creator into your heart and into your mind, The creator stretches you beyond what you could imagine yourself being stretched. And the old person has to die. So why would that process be any different when childbirth happens? So there's again a will and a thought that's being continued forward through the energy of the patriarch. There are people who are stuck in mental prisons. When you're stuck in a mental prison, your first reaction to information like this is going to be suspicion and skepticism, because we're trained and born to always be skepticism of black men in particular. Whatever they want to do, there's an angle. Whatever. Oh, you want a bunch of sex. You want a bunch of this. You want a bunch of that. But again, do you say that to the creator? Why would you impregnate everybody with your spirit? Why do we all have to not only we got to give birth to your spirit through us? Why is that the only way we can achieve freedom? So now let's take it to the woman. Does she achieve freedom by submitting to the ownership of the man and allowing his spirit to come through her? Obviously, the answer is yes. But, one of the things that messes this up, or where people kind of get stuck in the mind frame, is that you got to think about the original story with Adam and Eve, right? Eve was taught that there was something outside of her union, or not taught. There was something outside of her union with her natural counterpart, the person that she came out of from inside of his body, that there was something better outside of that union. From a complete stranger, she was told this. And of course, Adam didn't stop it and say, well, let me just kill the snake. I'll get into this another time. Eve, if you go over there, I'm not dealing with, you can't be my wife anymore. If you're adulterous enough to take on the information and the thought seed and the will of a beast, no less, then we can't be together anymore. Right. But that's a deeper one. So the moment that serpent came in and said that to Eve, what happened was the original line of patriarchal thought was cut. Right in that moment where she accepted it. So what then was the result of that? Well, two men with different brains, Cain and Abel. One man, and they're diametrically opposed to one another. One man kills the other one. Right? Because the line was broken. So this is where you get the introduction of duality. Now we're thinking with a dualistic mindset. That's why it was said that Eve brought forth Cain. But it didn't necessarily say that Cain was begotten, because there's an idea there that Cain was possibly the seed of the serpent, or the seed of Satan, because in thought, he certainly was. You see what happens when you have a field that's uncovered, then different seeds can be planted into it. And if 10 of us walk by a field and we all just throw different seeds into it, and then something grows, who takes ownership? Who takes responsibility? So we're not sure where Cain's mindset came from, because duality was introduced. Okay. So this is not only a form of polyandry, which is why polyandry has nothing to do with nation building. A lot of times people try to give it some play when they talk about polygamy. They say, well, you could do polyamory, you could do polygyny, you could do, polyamory, but, no. That stuff is an abomination. Polygyny, one man, many women. That's how you restore the kingdom, period. Ain't no way around it. All right. Now, people say whatever they want, but you got to always pay attention when people are sharing certain thought patterns with you. What is their intention? What is the will that they're trying to implant in you? So just like the serpent, what was the serpent's will towards Adam and Eve? Especially considering he didn't make them. Well, he didn't create them. So why do you care if there's more wisdom? What do you care? Because you got a bone to pick with this person. You're trying to prove something. You're trying to prove a point. If I can distort and ruin your creation, then I must be as powerful as you. That's how sick people think. It really is. People will take money from you. They do all kind of things. They'll ruin your children. They'll knock the windows out of your car and slash the tires. If I can destroy what you have created, what you have produced, then I'm just as powerful as you. Without realizing that I can just produce more. You ain't really doing as much as you think you're doing. But those two seeds warring, are a product now of the dilution of a bloodline. Remember I said to you all before that all of this is about bloodlines. It's always been all about bloodlines from the very beginning. When you start speaking about the Nephilim, when you start speaking about the blue bloods, when you start speaking about the royal families, over in Europe, it's always been about bloodlines from the very beginning. And you get that from that first creation story. Let us make man in our image and our likeness. And that one thought going forward is the maintenance of a bloodline. So what the disruptor or what the serpent comes in and does is, well, let me get in there. Let me get myself in that bloodline. I want to be a part of that. And now what happens? It dilutes. Because people are not mating based off of what will restore the kingdom. They're mating based off of their own lust and feelings and their weaknesses. So I'm going to mate with the serpent so I can get more wisdom, because I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, I don't have proof, but I'm assuming that there's more wisdom to be had outside of this union that I have with this person. So I don't want to be a housewife. I want to go get my master's, because the world has more wisdom for me than my home does. Disruptors. I'm not saying don't get your master's, get your family first. That's how that should work. Because then you're strong enough to go get your master's. Before that, you ain't strong enough to go do that. Just like a lot of women could go out and teach, but they're not strong enough to teach. They haven't had the right mind built in them yet. They want to teach and then hopefully attract a man that will then want to marry. No real man wants to marry any woman who's overexposed. That's a lesson for you sisters. Physically overexposed, if you like taking pictures showing your butt and your tits and all that stuff. Strong men or like what they call alpha men never deal with women who not only everyone else has had, but everyone else has seen. It's a turnoff. Strong men also never deal with women who feel like they need to be out front. Because what are you representing? That means she already has a drive and a will inside of her from somewhere else. And unless that drive and will is like coming to America is from her father, who she's on stage promoting her father's restaurant, then you already know she's already married to someone. And in order to be with her, you got to combat that person. Strong men know that we have better things to do with our time than that. Doesn't matter how pretty you are, how well shaped you are, or whatever. There's a lot of women out here. You're never as important as you might think you are. You're never as special as you might think you are. And unfortunately, sometimes you find that out in the most hurtful of ways. And then that creates a lot of trauma inside. Okay. But I'm telling you how to avoid that trauma, So, there's nothing wrong with achieving, but you have to get the solid foundation of a family first. If not, it's like, it's like building a plane without having the wheels. You got the whole plane, but no landing gear. You have to establish the rudiments and the foundations first, or nothing else will work after that. So even when it comes to nation building as a man, if you don't establish a family first that you're ruling over, not I have my family, but my wife does her own thing and I do mine. My wife's a headache. Yeah, I got children, but I want them to have a regular upbringing. Yeah, I'm learning this and I'm learning that, but I want my children to be like every other child and go to school and go to college and everything like that. You ain't the one. You ain't the one. And it shows a lack of faith. Sometimes you got to put away that old raggedy family and get a new one. You might have children, and I'm speaking to you brothers, and you got children out here and they're doing their own thing and their mothers is not interested in what you put them all away and just get new ones. There are so many women out here that want to be covered is ridiculous. Certain cities you go to, you can't spit without hitting a woman who wants to be covered. So you'd be a fool to keep going through it. Either you're a fool or you just broke. You're a broken person. So you have no self-esteem. So you continue to suffer foolishness. Okay. So again, that idea of the seeds warring was a product of Cain having two fathers. You see? So when you have two fathers, you have two authors, two authorities. Who do I listen to? You see? Now that creates a schizophrenia inside of the mind. Two different causes will produce two different effects. Plain and simple. And some effects don't blend as well as others. So what I'm saying in that sense, that polygyny is the creator's way. It's just what it is. You want a better household, you want to be better kingdom, have sister wives. Get a bunch of women who are all under your rule. It will qualify you for external rule much more than just having one. The one man, one wife is the simplest form of marriage that the Creator has established. It's the simplest form. Doesn't mean that it's the only form. Doesn't mean that it's the best form. It's the basics where you begin at. That's the beginning. Okay. And again, I know people have their own, but I promise you, anything that you have against it is something that's of Satan anyway. So that's why I really don't like to get into it too much. Whether you're starting to talk about money or you say, well, I'm a jealous person. You're not supposed to be jealous anyway. Spirit of jealousy comes from where? Does that come from the Creator or come from Satan? So anything you say, I promise you, anything you say is going to be something satanic. Right? Now, I'm not telling you all to go practice polygyny. I'm just giving background as to why I'm speaking directly. You go do whatever you feel like doing. I'm not saying it's a requirement to be in on it, because somebody asked me that before. Is it a requirement that I be polygynous? No. But there's elementary information and then there's higher information. And I've given a lot of the elementary for a long time, but it's like you having one business and you have the potential to have more than one business, but I know you're scared to have more than one business. So I just keep talking to you about the one business. After a while, even I get tired of that. I'm ready to have a more intelligent discourse, So I'm just giving that as some background. There are certain things that have to be restored before the kingdom of the Creator can come together. And to be real simple, to give it to you, the man has to be the head of his family. So that means men have to head up families. That's number one. His relationship number one is family. I'm sorry. So I combine them. So I'll say number one, he has to have a family. Number two, he has to be the head of that family. Number three, his relationship with the Creator has to be disseminated to his wife and children. That's it. It's 3 steps. But until that happens, there will be no restoration of any divine kingdom. Ever. There won't be. Okay. Now there are tricks that will dilute that experience, or the possibility of that happen, like I explained before. But those are the foundations. You cannot bypass a man's right to be a king in his home. You can't bypass it. You can't get around it. And still like, well, I'm spiritual and no, you can't. So for all these, like I said, the goddesses and the queen mothers and all that, they're full of shite. They're going to send you right to hell, right where they are. And a lot of them come to me for readings. I know how horrible their lives are, how lonely they really are. They got nothing. They got nothing going for themselves except for a bunch of pretty Oshun and Oya altars and some nice head wraps and some good food, some good vegan food. Cause everything with them is external. They're fine. They're gorgeous. Nice skin and, they got the best recipes. They got the flyest clothes made for them. They take all the nice pictures with all the best conscious celebrities and all that stuff like that. But their lives are garbage. Garbage. I'm telling you, they're on the phone with me crying every 7 days. Why? Because they don't have a patriarch giving them the divine will. They're out there pretending that they have it by, oh, I'm in tune with my ancestors. I'm in tune. They in tune with everything. But you notice they never in tune with one thing. That's your clue right there. Well, who guides you? Well, my ancestors, the water, the sun, the moon, Oshun, Oya. You know, they listen to everything. See, what is that? The dilution of a bloodline. All them seeds in the blood diluted to nothing. So how can you be recognized by the greatest spirit when your blood is weak? I understand, like I said, there's a castration of the male principle. That's the norm. You gotta castrate them. That comes back from your Greco-Roman experience where you had, again, the eunuchs. And, you know, you'd have one man, he'd be like the what do they call it? The cock of the yard, or the hen, the rooster of the yard. And then everybody else, even if there's males around, they are all subject to him. And back in Rome, he would be sexing everybody, male, female alike. That was the thing about ancient. It was acceptable among men or males as long as you were the aggressor. So if you were the male who was taking it, then you were considered to be weak, but you could take anyone, animal, female, male, whatever, as long as you were the one taking it. So sex was always seen as more of an aggressive conquest, you know, as opposed to an experience that could be used to, again, to further the kingdom of the creator, you know. So there's been a disruption in that sense of with our young boys not being able to properly, they're being castrated. So they're not able to develop and grow into men. And as a result, they don't know how to be sons. Okay. I'm a son, you know, and being a son to my father, has always been an art to it. It's not just, yeah, pops, blah, 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 you know, like this certain way. Even my sons, I see the way that they come at me sometimes when, you know, my son got on me the other day because he was like, you know, Baba, why does it take you so long to, get back to me? Like when I text you or I call you, like you take forever. Like sometimes it'd be like a whole day before you respond. But he had to explain, like, I'm going through an experience right now where I'm trying to be very honest and direct with people. So, Bob, I feel like I need to bring this up to you. And then I had to, you know, think about it. And I was like, okay, you know, and I explained to him, well, son, you ask some very deep questions sometimes. And my day is so active, as you know, that I don't like to just throw anything at you. I like to usually wait till I can sit down, which is late at night, where I could really respond thoughtfully. Right. So he accepted the answer. He's like, okay, I'm cool with that. He had to know enough about me to understand how to approach me. Right. So he's practicing his, I'm using the word sonship. I don't think it's a real word, but you know, his ability to be a son. I've had to do the same thing. How do I say this, or knowing what to say, what not to say, or how to listen when I'm being told to do something, you know, how do I follow that order in a way that, you know, he wants to see this thing carried out, or present myself in a way that he wants me to present myself. Right now, that prepares me for a patriarchal order. If I don't have that now, and to make it clear, I have my sons, let's say 3 or 4 of y'all, 5 of y'all, you got your sons too. These are the young men that establish the furtherance and the expansion of the kingdom later. So if they're not trained how to be sons, how does the kingdom expand? It ain't through your daughters. It doesn't expand. Nothing happens. You see, that's why there's no growth in the conscious community. Because there's no families. Families have to come together, and families who have been trained in patriarchy. So we castrate the male so that never happens. You know, once the households assemble, then you have tribes and clans assembling. That's when it gets scary. You look at, Mormon communities. They're a great example of that. Even Amish communities, great example of that. They are patriarchal, and Amish are actually polygynous. They just don't advertise that, but they actually are polygynous. And the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, they speak against it, but I know for a fact that many of them actually are still polygynous, but the point is that they all they have prophets. They have a patriarchal rule, and all of these it doesn't take away from the men who were there. They're not, they're not all bowing. They don't bend the knee to the prophet. You see, but they recognize that energy is necessary so that we are emulating what is in heaven, as above, so below. The idea of women submitting to their own husband, I want to tap into that for a second, is because the woman is owned by the husband. Now, how is she owned by the husband? You remember when I said her first experience is non-elective ownership? It's her father. So we have sonship and we have daughtership. Both have, again, I know they're not words, but just go for the ride. So the daughter, she recognizes I am my father's property, and what my father needs me to do, wants me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Right? So what happens is when a man comes along, this is where most of y'all messed up. He has to exchange with your father in order to have you, because your father owns you. Whether he's exchanging goods, whether he's exchanging services, whether he's exchanging time. I worked for you for 10 years. I want your daughter. Right? But nonetheless, there's an idea that is very clear. You are owned by your father, and in order to have you, I have to exchange something to gain ownership of you. Now, whereas I said the first one was non-elective, the second one, she chooses. So it's willful submission. Somebody just doesn't pop up and say, I want that one in the back with the pink shirt on. How much? It's not that kind of thing. So she has to agree to it, and that is scriptural. But the idea of the transference of ownership becomes becomes key in furthering patriarchy. Now, of course, when I say things like that, the disruptors are going to pop in. You mean he owns me? What you mean he owns me? My father don't own me. Yeah, he probably did. Why? Because there's so many disruptors in society. Most of y'all didn't even grow up with fathers. So who am I purchasing you from? So I don't purchase you. You know what I'll just do? I'll wine and dine you. How many women, now we talk about the spirit, right? I can get a woman just by buying her a car. So I give it to her. And what do? I give her a ring, buy her a car, pay her rent, send her through school. But I'm supposed to take that money and give it to her father to buy her. But I bought her through romance. See what happens? So the transfer of ownership never actually happens. You don't really get the title to that woman. And 10 times out of 10, if she grew up without a father, she's already owned by the males in the dominant society. That's why when you approach her, she gives you the responses that the males in the dominant society tell her to give to you. Got to have a job if you want to be with me. That was an old school song back in the days. I got to have a job. I got to be a debt slave in order to get you. Not got to go talk to my father if you want to be with me. You see what I'm saying? So there's an idea there that's been implanted in her by the males of the dominant. She's remember, the nature of woman is that she's always gonna receive. That's why you gotta cover her. That's why you gotta keep her protected. She can't help it. Like I said, women are the world's suckers. Because they're gonna take in everything. It's the truth, Aquia. They're gonna take in everything. And it's your job to put a hint. Get that up out of here. That can't be here. Right? So what happens a lot of times, by the time you get her, she's already so married to the males in the dominant society that you can't buy her from them because they're ghosts. Right? But what you can do is show her that you've bent the knee. and that I'm willing to be subject to them along with you. So what do you do in that moment? You castrate yourself. So instead of showing her that my line is with the creator Yah, I'm showing her that my line is with Satan or the beast, 666. That's the state. My line is with the beast system. And we're all in alignment with the beast. And in order to be in alignment with the beast, I have to do what? I have to remove my creative potential. I have to become a eunuch. I have to castrate myself. My creative potential is what allows me to further the line of Yah. It comes through me. That's why if your father is a Hebrew, you're a Hebrew. So, it's important for you to understand, just like Adam was the property of the Elohim, because anything that came out of the Elohim was owned by the Elohim, just like the sky and the earth and the water and, all those different things. If it came out of the mind of the Elohim, then the Elohim owns it. So if I am able to receive a woman and to make her into my image and likeness, I own her. Okay. Now, I know, again, for some that may be offensive, but there are women who want to be owned, because owning means I'm submitting to this man. You see, I am now this man's responsibility. I now have someone who would kill and die for me. That's the deeper thing. So sometimes, when people say, well, you got enough money to take care of all of them, like I said, and that's the spirit of the world talking, but don't talk to me about money, man. If I've put guns in people's faces for my women, so which one is worth more? Is it money or the fact that I'm willing to blow somebody's head off for the dignity of my woman? Because that's what my tribal code tells me to do. It doesn't work as a Western man. It doesn't work. You won't last 6 months. You have to have an understanding of ancient ways and ancient values and how they apply today. The idea of romance will snatch the process of ownership from you. That's its purpose. I'm going to beguile her away from her father. You see it in movies, back in the days, dude would come to the house and he, Shireen! You know what I'm saying? He trying to get her to come outside. You know what I'm saying? That's romance. I want to beguile her away from her uncle sleeping on the sofa or whomever, but I want to beguile her away from her patriarch. So I can do what? So I can implant a foreign idea in her that doesn't continue the thought frame that the patriarch of her family has established. Because it's just like when you go to the continent, you go to buy land, like we say we purchased the woman, but it's the same thing. Like a lot of brothers from here, and I try to explain them, think like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Nigeria and get me a woman. I'm gonna go to Ghana. I'm gonna go to Ethiopia. Nobody's just it doesn't matter how poor them people are. They're not just gonna give you their daughter. And I try to explain that to brothers all the time. They don't listen. You might meet a woman. She might become your girlfriend. She's going to hit you up for money. You're going to be sending her and her real boyfriend to school. Baba Haru, you know how it goes, because you're talking about families. And I have sisters over there I know where the father's dead, grandfather's old and sleep all the time. And even the mother will hold it down no, I don't care. No, you're not taking my daughter away. You see, there's that sense of also, in a tribal sense, we're not going to dilute our blood. So yeah, you coming with money. We appreciate that. We will take the money. We'll take it. Thank you very much. But, no, you're not taking her. You see? So it's the same instance with how we're moving. Right? Or sometimes how we're tempted out of the stronghold of the creator through wealth and riches, but it's the same thing with how we need to interact with each other. Sometimes our romance and our desire and our love for trinkets will snatch us away from the will of the creator, which comes from the patriarch. Sometimes this happens also through Willie Lynchism. All right. So we gotta be clear that there's so many different mind games going on. You know, some of them are very brutal. Some of them are very violent, but some of them are also just plantation mentality. It's just plantation thinking, you know. And when that happens, when the daughter is not allowed to choose for the second time, and she's not able to have that willful submission, if you will, she usually perpetuates a system, like I said, that comes from the dominant males of the society. She castrates her sons. She castrates every male that's around her. Every male she meets, she immediately seeks to castrate. So like right now, if I was doing a live, let's say if I was doing a call-in, you know, I would get the sister who would say, so wait a minute. I'm trying to understand what you're talking about. Wait a minute. So they'll come in with an order. Wait a minute, telling me what to do. That's number one. And then y'all know me enough to say like, wait, hold on a second. You gonna stop shouting orders or start there? Cause I'm gonna pick up on everything. You're not cutting 1 inch of this beautiful staff off. It's not happening. Right? So after they do that, then they'll say, so you got money can you take care of these men? My pockets are none of your, all these women, my pockets are not your business. I probably make more than you because I'm not as ignorant to be calling no, you know, like, so don't worry about it. But what man would just reveal his finances to some random female like that unless he felt already that he was under her system? What man would allow himself to be subject to assaults in the form of questions like that, right? So there's so many different things that there's a chip that immediately kicks in, that immediately says, if he's displaying manhood, you do this. You immediately start chopping it down. And sometimes the way that it's chopped down is so subtle. Sometimes it's sexuality. I had shared a video with the brothers in the group, you know, Last Strong. And there was a woman talking about how she wanted a sister wife and this and that. And everything that she spoke about with, you know, I'm simplifying. There's a lot more in the description, but a lot of it was sexual. You know, I want a woman who's going to F my man right and do it nasty the way he wants it and everything. Cause I may not be able to do it. I may be traveling and handling business and that. Everything she said was disgusting and manly. And I shared it with the brothers because there was a time years ago before there was as much information online and stuff like that about polygyny where a sister like that, brothers would have went crazy over just to have a woman say, yeah, I'll do it, because it seemed like such a rarity. And a lot of brothers got caught up in bad relationships, not recognizing that just because it's polygynous, the person still has to be a righteous person. Don't just grab up anybody and say, yeah, I'll do it. You know, so there's a certain mindset that has to come into play, you know, as well, you know, and of course she was dressed a certain way. I don't want to get into all of it, but, these are all different ways to castrate your true manhood. So sometimes they'll come at you from the sexual angle. You know, they'll start flirting or, you know, they'll just figure out all ways to weaken you. And what are they ultimately seeking to do? What is the whole thing? Prevent the rise of the Black Messiah. This is COINTELPRO at a spiritual level. This is what J. Edgar Hoover did to the Black Panthers. And what did he say? We have to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. Could have used any other language. Why that language? These people have gone through enough secret societies to know where the Messiah rises from. You see, they know. So if you keep the man castrated, you keep homes matriarchal, you keep patriarchy completely subdued, you know, there'll never be a Black Messiah. Never. It just won't happen. That's how that works. All right. So I'm just going to share this, but I know that was a lot. And I cut out a whole lot. When I do the series, it'll probably be about 6 parts. So, cause there's a lot to this because there's more solutions. There's more, evidence of the issue. But ultimately, this is why we have an On New Covering initiative. All you sisters are covered. You're going to remain covered. So you're going to go from here to the man that you're going to conjoin with. And it's always going to be a patriarchal environment. And that means a lot of people are not going to want to be not going to want to be a part of it. But you are literally battling satanic wickedness. It's not an opinion that you're battling, and that's what I'm explaining to you in this. When someone says, well, why can't we both be in charge? Or sometimes I got better ideas. Those thoughts and those ideas don't come from that woman naturally. They just don't. They come from that demon that's inside of her. And I'm showing you the original form. And there's so many different ways that it sneaks out, because sex is where all the truth comes out. That's when egos get dropped. And during a sexual experience, you don't want a man who's limp. You don't want a man who, as soon as you touch him, he changes and bends. Oh, I'm sorry, babe. I couldn't hold it. You want a man who can stay firm and stay directed for the duration until something can be created, at the very least. So why would that change outside of the bedroom? Why could you only be submissive in that environment? Why can he only take the lead in that environment? And of course, you got the knuckleheads that will say, well, sometimes I want to take the lead too. Right. But you understand what I'm saying. Because no matter what, something stiff has to be inserted into something soft. No matter which direction you're going with this thing. He has to be firm and directed, no matter what. And you have to be yielding, no matter how you're going to do it. You see. All right. So I will hand it back over to you.